Let me tell you about Quentin, a kid kicked out by his own mom, Xena, for her new family, only to become a tech CEO with millions. The Gilded Cage. I've been trimming hedges and tending to the manicured lawns of California's elite for years now, ever since I left the Marines. The sun beats down on these sprawling estates in Beverly Hills and Silicon Valley, where the rich play their games of power and betrayal behind tinted windows and ivy-covered walls. I keep my head down, clippers in hand, but I see everything. The whispers, the fights, the secrets they think are buried under their perfectly curated roses. That's how I came to know Quentin's story, a tale of ambition, abandonment, and a family that's more thorn than bloom. I first heard about Quentin while working the gardens at Stanley and Abigail's estate in Montecito. They're old money, the kind that donates to museums and throws galas for charity, but they've got a soft spot for their grandson. Stanley, with his weathered hands and sharp eyes, would talk about Quentin while I pruned his citrus trees. "That boy's got steel in him," he'd say, pride mixing with regret. Abigail would nod, her silver hair catching the light, but her smile always faltered when the subject of her daughter, Xena, came up. That's when I pieced together the jagged edges of Quentin's life. Quentin was Xena's son from a fling she had at 20, back when she was a starry-eyed girl chasing dreams in LA. The father, some hotshot real estate mogul, bolted the minute Xena got pregnant. She didn't chase him for child support, too proud, or maybe too bitter. Stanley and Abigail stepped in, raising Quentin like their own while Xena clawed her way through college and into a career as a socialite. By the time Quentin was 8, Xena was dating Ralph, a slick-talking venture capitalist with a knack for risky deals. They got married after 3 years, and I reckon Quentin thought he'd found a family. He was wrong. I was working at Xena and Ralph's place in Bel Air last month when I noticed the cracks in their perfect facade. Their mansion, all glass and marble, looked like it belonged on a magazine cover, but the air inside was thick with tension. I overheard them arguing by the pool, their voices sharp over the hum of my lawnmower. "We can't keep this up, Xena," Ralph hissed, his tie loosened like he'd just lost a deal. "The accounts are bleeding. We need to do something." Xena, in her designer sunglasses, sipped her martini and snapped. "Then we go to Quentin. He's got the money now." My ears pricked up. Quentin, the kid they'd cast out years ago, was now their lifeline. That's when I knew this was a story worth telling. See, when Quentin was 16, Xena and Ralph had their twins, Yara and Zara. The whole family was over the moon, except Quentin, who didn't see the storm coming. After the twins were born, Xena and Ralph sat him down for a serious talk. I got this part from Abigail, who still tears up when she recounts it. They told Quentin they couldn't afford to keep him in the house anymore, not with 2 new mouths to feed. Never mind that Xena and Ralph were pulling 6 figures each as tech consultants back then. Quentin, just a kid, offered to get a job, to help out, but Xena shut him down cold. "We need to save for the twins," she said, her voice like ice. "They deserve it more." That word, deserve, cut Quentin deeper than any knife. He packed a bag and walked out, knowing he wasn't wanted. He landed at Stanley and Abigail's, who took him in without a second thought. I saw Quentin once, years back, when I was planting azaleas at Stanley's place. He was a lanky teenager, quiet, with eyes that held too much for someone his age. He'd help me carry mulch bags sometimes, not saying much, but I could tell he was a fighter. The Marines taught me to spot that kind, folks who've been knocked down but keep getting up. Quentin got a part-time job at 16, flipping burgers to ease the burden on his grandparents. When it came time for college, Xena and Ralph didn't lift a finger. Stanley and Abigail were too old to help much, so Quentin's uncle, Theodore, a big-shot lawyer, co-signed a student loan. Quentin swore he'd never let Theodore take the fall for it, and he didn't. He worked through college, paid every dime, and graduated with a degree in computer science. No one from his family showed up to his graduation, not even a card from Xena. Fast forward to now, and Quentin's a name in Silicon Valley. At 33, he's the youngest CEO of a tech startup that's making waves, some AI platform that's got investors drooling. I heard about his big promotion 4 months ago while trimming hedges at Theodore's place. Theodore, proud as a peacock, let slip to me that Quentin had just landed a corner office and a 7-figure salary. "He's done it all on his own," Theodore said, but there was a shadow in his voice. He'd mentioned Quentin's success to Xena at a family gathering, thinking it might spark a reconciliation. Big mistake. I was at Xena and Ralph's estate again last week, edging their lawn, when I saw their Bentley pull up. Xena stepped out, her heels clicking on the driveway, Ralph trailing behind like a scolded dog. They were dressed to impress, but I could tell they were desperate, the kind of desperate that makes rich folks reckless. I kept my head down, but I heard Xena say, "We'll go to his place tonight. He owes us." Ralph muttered something about bad optics, but Xena cut him off. "He's our son, Ralph. He'll come around." I nearly laughed. Son? She hadn't called Quentin that in years. That evening, they showed up at Quentin's modest house in Palo Alto. I know this because I was working late at Vernon's place, Quentin's neighbor, and saw their car parked out front. Quentin let them in, probably hoping for an apology after all these years. Instead, Xena and Ralph launched into a sob story about their failed tech venture, how they'd lost millions, how the twins needed college funds. They had the gall to ask Quentin to foot the bill for Yara and Zara's tuition, hundreds of thousands for Ivy League dreams. Quentin, calm as a sniper, reminded them how they'd kicked him out to save resources for the twins. "You said they deserved it more," he said, his voice steady but sharp. "So why come to me now?" Xena played the victim card, saying she'd raised him alone for years, that he was ungrateful. Ralph chimed in, accusing Quentin of abandoning the family. Quentin didn't budge. He told them to leave, and they did, but not before Xena hissed, "This isn't over." I got more of the story from Chloe, Quentin's business partner, when I was planting succulents at her loft in San Francisco. Chloe's sharp, the kind of woman who can outsmart a boardroom full of suits. She's got this spark with Quentin too. Nothing official, but you can see it in the way she talks about him, her eyes lighting up when she mentions his name. Over coffee, she offered me a rare treat from a client. She told me Quentin was rattled after his parents' visit. "He's tough," she said, stirring her latte, "but they know how to get under his skin." She mentioned a letter Quentin got from Yara and Zara asking to meet him. Chloe thought it was genuine, but I wasn't so sure. Xena's got a way of pulling strings, and those twins have been raised in her shadow. I saw Yara and Zara once at Xena's annual gala. They were maybe 15, all dolled up in designer dresses, giggling by the pool. They didn't know me from the help, but I overheard them talking about their big brother Quentin like he was some myth. "Mom says he's selfish," Zara said, tossing her hair. Yara looked uneasy, like she wasn't so sure. Now, with their college dreams on the line, they're reaching out to him. I wonder if they're pawns in Xena's game or if they're starting to see through her. Either way, Quentin's got a choice to make, and it's not an easy one. As I finished up at Vernon's that night, I saw Quentin's porch light flicker on. He was standing outside, staring at the stars, a letter in his hand, probably from the twins. Chloe was with him, her hand brushing his arm, a quiet kind of support. I don't know what's coming next, but I've seen enough of these rich folks to know it won't be pretty. Xena's not the type to back down, and Quentin's got too much steel to bend. Me? I'll keep tending the gardens, listening to the whispers. There's a storm brewing in this gilded cage, and I've got a front row seat. Secrets of the past. The gardens of California's elite are like confessionals. People think they're alone with their secrets, but the help always hears. I've been clipping hedges and pulling weeds for years, and I've learned to keep my mouth shut and my eyes open. Working the estates of Beverly Hills and Silicon Valley, I've seen it all. Affairs, backstabbing, and families tearing themselves apart over money. Quentin's story, though, is something else. A tangle of betrayal and buried truths that's got me hooked. I'm just the gardener, a former Marine who's seen enough to know when a storm's coming, and this one's about to break. I was at Vernon's place in Palo Alto, Quentin's neighbor, shaping his topiary when I overheard a phone call that set my nerves on edge. Vernon, a retired banker with a nose for trouble, was talking to Quentin about a private detective named Walter. "He's digging into your past," Vernon said, his voice low. "Xena hired him. I kept my shears moving, but my ears were locked in. Xena, Quentin's mother, wasn't done with her son after he shut her down. She and her husband, Ralph, had come to Quentin's house a month ago, demanding he pay for their twins' college tuition. Quentin, now a hotshot CEO at 33, told them to get lost, reminding them how they'd kicked him out at 16 to save resources for Yara and Zara. Xena didn't take kindly to being refused, and now she was playing dirty. I'd met Walter once at Xena and Ralph's Bel Air mansion. He's a wiry guy, mid-40s, with a smirk that says he's always got an angle. I was mulching their rose beds when he showed up, all business in a cheap suit, whispering to Xena by the pool. I didn't catch much, but I heard leverage and Quentin's finances. Now, Vernon was telling Quentin that Walter was sniffing around his tech startup, looking for dirt to force his hand. What Vernon didn't know, what nobody knew yet, was that Walter wasn't just Xena's hired gun. He was playing both sides, and I'd soon find out how deep his game went. Quentin wasn't sitting idle. I saw him at Chloe's loft in San Francisco, where I was planting succulents for her rooftop garden. Chloe, his business partner, is a force, sharp, driven, with a smile that could disarm a boardroom or break a heart. There's something between her and Quentin, a spark that's more than just professional. I was hauling pots when I overheard them talking strategy. Xena's desperate, Chloe said, her voice steady but urgent. She'll do anything to keep her lifestyle. Quentin nodded, his jaw tight. She's got no claim on me, he said. Not after what she did. Chloe touched his arm, her eyes soft. We'll figure it out, Q. Together. That together hung in the air like a promise, and I could tell Quentin felt it too. Chloe had a lead. She'd been digging into Xena's past, thanks to a tip from Vernon, who'd heard rumors at a country club. Xena had hidden something big from Quentin, something about his father, a real estate tycoon who'd vanished before Quentin was born. Vernon mentioned old documents he'd seen years ago, hinting at a trust fund Xena might have siphoned off. Quentin, skeptical but curious, asked Chloe to look deeper. I admired his restraint. Most guys in his shoes would have stormed Xena's mansion, demanding answers. But Quentin's a planner, like a Marine, plotting an ambush. He was waiting for the right moment. Meanwhile, Yara and Zara, the 18-year-old twins, were starting to crack the perfect image Xena had painted of their family. I was at Xena's estate, pruning her olive trees, when I saw the girls by the pool arguing in hushed tones. Yara, the softer one with a poet's eyes, was clutching a phone. He's our brother, Zara, she said. We should hear him out. Zara, all fire and designer sunglasses, snapped back. Mom says he's selfish. He left us, remember? Yara shook her head. What if Mom's wrong? That caught me off guard. I kept my head down, but I could feel the rift growing. Yara had sent Quentin a letter asking to meet. Zara went along with it, but only because Xena pushed her to soften him up. I wondered if Yara was starting to see through her mother's lies. I got more pieces of the puzzle at Stanley and Abigail's Montecito estate, where I was tending their citrus grove. Stanley, Quentin's grandfather, was pacing the patio, his cane tapping the stone. Xena's lost her way, he told Abigail, who was watering her roses. She's dragging those girls into her mess. Abigail sighed, her hands trembling. Quentin deserves the truth, Stanley, about the money. I froze, my rake still in the dirt. Money? Stanley went on, saying Xena's first husband, Quentin's father, had left a trust fund for Quentin worth millions. Xena, claiming it was for family expenses, had drained it to bankroll her and Ralph's lavish life. Stanley and Abigail had suspected it for years but never had proof. I felt a knot in my gut. Quentin had clawed his way to success while Xena spent his birthright on private jets and galas. Walter, the detective, was the wild card. I was at Bethany's place. She's Theodore's wife and Xena's friend, trimming her hedges when I overheard her on the phone with Xena. You need to make peace with Quentin, Bethany urged, her voice syrupy but calculated. He's your son. He'll help if you ask nicely. Xena laughed, cold and sharp. I don't need peace. I need Walter to find something I can use. I kept snipping, but my mind was racing. Later that day, I saw Walter slip into Bethany's guest house carrying a folder. Curious, I lingered near the window, pretending to check the sprinkler system. Walter was on the phone, not with Xena, but with Quentin. I've got what you need, he said, his voice low, but it'll cost you. My blood ran cold. Walter was double dealing, feeding Quentin info while still working for Xena. What was his endgame? Quentin met with Yara and Zara at a cafe in Palo Alto, a neutral spot. I wasn't there, but Chloe filled me in when I was back at her loft, repotting her agaves. Yara was nervous, her hands fidgeting as she asked Quentin about his life. Why don't you talk to Mom, she said, almost pleading. Zara, arms crossed, just glared. Quentin was honest but guarded, saying he'd built his life without Xena and didn't owe her anything. Yara's eyes welled up. She was starting to see the cracks in her mother's story. Zara, though, doubled down. You're just mad because Mom moved on, she spat. Quentin didn't flinch. She didn't move on. She threw me out. Chloe, who was there for moral support, squeezed his hand under the table. That small gesture kept him steady, but I could tell the twins were tearing him up inside. He wanted to hate them, but they were just kids caught in Xena's web. Walter's double game came to a head when he met Quentin at Vernon's house. I was there, edging the lawn, when Walter pulled up in his beat-up sedan. He handed Quentin a folder, bank records, emails, proof that Xena had siphoned off his trust fund. "This is what she's been hiding," Walter said, his smirk barely hidden. Quentin's face was stone, but his hands shook as he read. "Why give me this?" he asked. Walter shrugged. "Xena's not paying enough. You can." Quentin didn't trust him, and neither did I. Walter was too slick, and when he left, he made a call. I couldn't quite hear, but I caught the words, "Another kid." Another kid? My mind spun. Did Xena have another secret a sibling Quentin didn't know about? Chloe was the one keeping Quentin grounded. I saw them late one night at her loft, going over the documents. She'd pulled an all-nighter, her laptop glowing with spreadsheets. "This proves she stole from you," Chloe said, her voice fierce. "We can take her to court." Quentin looked at her, and for a moment, the walls he'd built around himself crumbled. "I don't know what I'd do without you," he said, his voice low. Chloe smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You'd manage, but you don't have to." They didn't kiss, but the air between them was electric. I turned back to my plants, giving them their moment. As I left Chloe's that night, I saw Yara's car parked outside Quentin's house. She was alone, sitting on his porch, looking lost. I didn't stop. My job's to watch. Not meddle, but I knew things were about to get messier. Xena's secrets were unraveling, Walter was playing a dangerous game, and Quentin was caught between revenge and redemption. I've seen enough rich folks destroy themselves to know this won't end quietly. And me, I'll keep tending the gardens, listening for the next piece of the puzzle. Reckoning and redemption. The thing about rich folks' gardens is they're never as perfect as they look. You can trim the hedges, water the roses, but there's always rot beneath the surface, secrets that fester until they burst. I've been tending the lawns of California's elite long enough to know that Quentin's story was heading for a showdown. As a former Marine, I've seen my share of battles, but this one, fought in the glitzy mansions of Beverly Hills and Silicon Valley, was a different kind of war. It was personal, ugly, and about to explode. I was at Bethany's estate, Theodore's wife and Xena's friend, raking leaves when I sensed the storm brewing. Bethany was on her patio, whispering into her phone, her voice tight with urgency. "Xena, you have to make this right with Quentin," she said. "He's your son." I kept my rake moving, but I knew Bethany wasn't playing peacemaker out of kindness. She was in Xena's pocket, hoping to cash in on Quentin's success. Xena had been after Quentin for weeks, ever since he refused to pay for her twins' college tuition. She'd hired Walter, a slimy private detective, to dig up dirt on Quentin, but Walter was playing both sides, feeding Quentin proof that Xena had stolen his inheritance, a trust fund from his father, a real estate tycoon who'd vanished before Quentin was born. Now, at 33, Quentin was a tech CEO with millions, and Xena wanted a piece of him. I'd seen Quentin with Chloe, his business partner, at her San Francisco loft a few days back, where I was repotting her succulents. Chloe's a firecracker, smart, fierce, with a warmth that cuts through Quentin's walls. They were poring over Walter's documents, bank records showing Xena had siphoned off millions meant for Quentin to fund her and Ralph's lavish life. "We've got her," Chloe said, her eyes blazing. Quentin nodded, but his face was haunted. "I just wanted a family," he admitted, his voice low. Chloe reached for his hand, her touch lingering. "You've got me," she said, and the air between them crackled. I busied myself with the plants, but I could feel their bond tightening, a lifeline in the chaos. Yara and Zara, Xena's 18-year-old twins, were starting to unravel their mother's lies. I'd overheard them at Xena's Bel Air mansion, where I was pruning olive trees. Yara, the sensitive one, was pacing by the pool, her phone clutched tight. "Quentin's our brother," she told Zara, her voice breaking. Mom lied about him. Zara, loyal to Xena and dripping in designer gear, crossed her arms. "He abandoned us, Yara. Mom said so." But Yara wasn't buying it anymore. She'd met Quentin at a cafe, heard his side, how Xena and Ralph kicked him out at 16 to save resources for them. Yara was torn, caught between love for her mother and the truth about her brother. Zara, though, clung to Xena's version, too afraid to face the cracks in their perfect family. Walter was the wild card, and I didn't trust him one bit. I was at Vernon's place, Quentin's neighbor in Palo Alto, edging his lawn when Walter pulled up in his beat-up sedan. He'd been double-dealing, giving Quentin the trust fund documents while still working for Xena. I overheard him on the phone as I swept clippings, his voice low and greasy. "I've got something bigger," he said. "Another kid. Xena's been hiding more than money. My gut twisted. Another kid? A secret sibling? Walter was dangling that bombshell, but I couldn't tell if he was bluffing or holding an ace. He caught me looking and smirked, like he knew I was listening. I went back to my work, but my mind was racing. The showdown came at Xena's mansion. Bethany had lured Quentin there under the guise of a family reconciliation. I was there, trimming the hedges, blending into the background like always. Quentin showed up with Chloe, who stood by him like a soldier ready for battle. Xena, in a silk dress that screamed money she didn't have, greeted them with a fake smile. Ralph was there too, looking like a man who'd already lost. Yara and Zara hovered nearby, Yara's eyes nervous, Zara's defiant. I kept my shears steady, but I was close enough to hear every word. Xena started with her usual act. Tears, guilt trips, saying Quentin owed her for raising him alone. "You're successful because of me," she said, her voice dripping with self-pity. Quentin didn't flinch. "You stole from me," he said, pulling out the trust fund documents. The air went still. Xena's face froze, then twisted. "How dare you?" she hissed. Chloe stepped forward, her voice cutting like a blade. "We have proof, Xena. Bank records, emails. You took millions meant for Quentin." Ralph paled, muttering. "Xena, what did you do?" Yara gasped, her hand over her mouth. Zara looked away, her loyalty cracking. That's when Walter walked in, uninvited, his smirk wider than ever. "Thought you'd want this," he said, tossing an audio recorder on the table. He pressed play, and Xena's voice filled the room, her admitting to stealing the trust fund, bragging about it to Bethany years ago. Quentin didn't need it, her recorded voice sneered. He was a burden. The room erupted. Xena lunged at Quentin, screaming he was ruining her life. I had dropped my shears and moved fast, grabbing her arm with Vernon, who'd been lingering by the gate. "Enough," I barked, my marine instincts kicking in. Chloe called the police, and within minutes, Xena was in cuffs, charged with assault and fraud. Ralph, shattered, took Yara and Zara and left, vowing to cut ties with Xena. I saw Yara the next day, sitting alone in Stanley and Abigail's garden in Montecito, where I was tending their citrus trees. She was crying, clutching a letter she'd written to Quentin, begging forgiveness. "I didn't know," she said when she saw me, her voice small. "Mom lied about everything." I nodded, keeping my thoughts to myself. Zara, though, wasn't ready to let go of Xena. She'd stormed off with Ralph, blaming Quentin for tearing the family apart. Stanley and Abigail, heartbroken, told me they were done with Xena too. "She made her choices," Abigail said, her eyes wet. "Quentin's our family now." Quentin took the trust fund to court and won it back, millions that should have been his all along. I was at Chloe's loft planting new agaves when she told me he decided to pay for Yara's college, but not Zara's. "Yara's trying to make things right," Chloe said, her voice soft with pride. "Zara's still too angry." Quentin and Chloe were closer than ever, their partnership turning into something deeper. I caught them laughing together, her head on his shoulder, and for the first time, Quentin looked free. As for Walter, he vanished after the showdown, but not before slipping me a note at Vernon's place. "Xena's got another kid out there," it read. "Find them if you dare." I tucked it in my pocket, unsure if it was truth or another of his games. I'm just the gardener, after all, not a detective. But I know this much. Quentin's fought his way out of Xena's shadow, and with Chloe by his side, he's building something new. Yara's searching for redemption, while Zara's still lost in her mother's lies. Xena's alone now, her empire crumbling. And me? I'll keep tending these gardens, listening for the next secret to bloom. There's always another story in these gilded cages, and I've got a feeling this one's not over yet. Thanks so much for watching. Your likes, subscriptions, and comments mean the world, and keep these stories coming.